Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Doesn't matter what time of day it is. I'm so happy to have you stop by my channel once again. My name is Reverend Paul J. Bern, and I am the online pastor of the online church known as the Social Gospel Worship and Learning Center, author of the Social Gospel blog, which you can find mainly on Substack, but it's on others too. Today I want to take time out, first off, for all you who may be seeing me in this video here for the first time. I represent a non-denominational, non-brick and mortar, non-religious online church. We have no need for acquiring a piece of real estate from which to have services like the mainstream churches do. We don't operate like that. So our creed simply is Jesus Christ, crucified, died, resurrected, and lives forever. That's our creed. And we try to apply that to various situations and various happenings in life and in current events and how they relate back to biblical prophecy. But today, I have another installment of my social gospel teaching series. This will be part 2 of Acts chapter 10, verses 17 through 33. So I'm going to need a few minutes to go through this. I also invite you to check out my author page on Amazon at amazon.com/author/Rev Paul J. Bern. And that's Bern with an E, by the way. Okay, so let's begin. Now, the last time we were together, we left off at verse 16 of Acts chapter 10. The Apostle Peter, at that time, was having a vision while he was in prayer, and I had made the point that his vision would not have occurred had he not been in a deep state of reverent prayer. It's very important. Critical, in fact. Using that as part of my closing remarks from the last time, I recall challenging all of you to bring your prayer lives up to Peter's level and to raise them up to his standard. I will not hold it against anyone if they are not at that level as of yet. I have been there myself. Nor against those who have tried and have fallen short. The real Jesus doesn't hold your failures against you. This is common to everyone, so let's not be discouraged when we miss the mark, and now and again we do, as I do. Nor are we to judge others for their actions. We're only human, so this is bound to happen from time to time. The main thing is to never give up and to keep on trying and praying together to Jesus no matter what, because, you see, someday we will all achieve that spiritual goal together, all at once. Now, moving right along, this will be part 1 of this week's study verses, Acts 10, verses 17 through 23. As we move on to part 2 of Acts chapter 10, Cornelius of Caesarea is arriving at the home of Simon the tanner, where Peter the apostle is staying. Just as Peter has come out of his trance on the rooftop from last week. Check out verse 10 of chapter 10 if you're unsure which verse that is. Okay, moving right along here. So let's take up where we left off, beginning at verse 17, and I quote, "While Peter was wondering about the meaning of his vision, the Spirit said to him, 'Simon, 3 men are looking for you. So get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them.' Peter went downstairs and said to the men, 'I'm the one you're looking for. Why have you come?' The men replied, 'We have come from Cornelius the centurion. He is a righteous and God-fearing man who is respected by all the Jewish people. A holy angel told him to have you come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say.' And then Peter invited the men into his house to be his guests. And the next day, they started out with all of them. Some of the brothers from the city of Joppa went along. And that concludes verse 23. Now, let's go over this, a sentence at a time. Let's remember once again our lesson from last week. When Peter was told in his vision to not call anything impure that God has made clean. That's from chapter 10, verse 15, by the way. In the context of Peter's vision, anything apparently referred to certain animals that were forbidden to be eaten by Jewish custom. This has its origins in Leviticus chapter 11, which you should research on your own. It's only a 5-minute read. It also applies to all other things, since the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. That little quote is from the 24th Psalm, verse 1. Okay, so we've got that established. Next, comparing Peter's vision about unclean things to modern issues. So this is where we're going to intersect this Bible study with the here and now, with today. This would then, regarding clean and unclean things, for example, this would include racial issues, because no one has the right to look down on any of our brothers and sisters. Let's not forget certain varieties of mushrooms as well as medical cannabis, both of which are constantly demonstrating remarkable medical properties for literally dozens of diseases, including a number of psychiatric disorders. In so doing, the psychedelic mushrooms and the medical cannabis have exposed the fraudulent nature of some mainstream psychiatric medications, end quote. That's the final reason that mushrooms and medical cannabis are still criminalized. If they were legal, that would present an existential threat to big pharma, the pharmaceutical giants, the real drug dealers of the land. You can get the full story on this topic from my 2016 book, Cannabis Legalization in the Bible, which you can order from this link. Actually, the title is Cannabis Legalization in the Bible, Compatible or Not, is the full title there, in case you're searching that one right now. The link to that is in the text. If you go back to Substack and read the text, the link will be there. It'll take you right straight to it. I haven't learned how to do that from here yet, but I'm still working on it. Now, I'm telling you all these things to point this out. To be of service to Christ is priceless, regardless of what you do when you're there. And we must be careful too when we're not, because God still sees all and he hears all. So, people, the Apostle Luke, the author of the book of Acts, continues his narration, beginning with Simon, 3 men are looking for you. From, I believe that's verse 18. So get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them. Peter went downstairs and said to the man, I'm the one you're looking for. Now, right here, I want you all to notice Peter's his immediate, obedience. Let's all be sure our obedience to the Lord is on the same level as Peter's was. Next, Peter is invited to Cornelius' house, even while still staying with Simon the tanner. It seems that Peter, along with the rest of the 12, nearly always had a place to stay in the homes of those that they ministered to. These were perceptive people, these guests, who knew the gospel was of far more value than any precious metals or jewelry, nor is it something that could be purchased. They saw their hospitality as a form of repayment to Peter and the others, and they were happy to have an opportunity to serve, just as we should, in whatever capacity. Doesn't matter what it is. You could be the leader of the band, or you could be the usher, or the janitor. They're all just as valuable to God. Now, to continue the quoting from there, moving down to the next verse, we have come from Cornelius the centurion. He is a righteous and a God-fearing man who is respected by all the Jewish people. A holy angel told him to have you come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say. End quote. Now, this was confirmation in the spirit for Peter, who was already expecting the detachment sent by Cornelius by the way of his vision that you recall from last week's session. Cornelius is clearly wanting to hear the gospel from Peter, especially since he was relatively close to him, only about a day's walk, which back then a day's walk wasn't nothing to people. That was run of the mill. The next day, Peter started out with them, and some of the brothers from Joppa went along. And so off to Caesarea they went, traveling by foot as usual. And now let's move on to the next part of this week's lesson, starting at verse 24. And it reads as follows, and I quote, the following day, he arrived in Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. As Peter entered the house, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet in reverence. But Peter made him stand up. Stand up, he said. I am only a man myself. Talking with him, Peter went inside and found a large gathering of people. He said to them, you are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate with a Gentile or to visit him. But God has shown me that I should not call any man impure or unclean. So when I was sent for, I came without raising any objection. Now, may I ask you why you've sent for me? And we'll cut it short at that question right there at verse 29 while we go through the rest of this, okay? So, let's not forget, first of all, let's not forget who Cornelius was. Cornelius was a complex individual. He was a Roman centurion who also happened to be a Christian sympathizer. Back in those days, that was a big no-no in the Roman Empire. Along the way, he became a man of real faith and who wanted to know more about his newfound faith, presumably a whole lot more. Cornelius may not have been entirely sure himself about how much of his new faith he could process, and so he had practically jumped at the chance to hear the gospel firsthand from Peter. Let's also not forget the character and integrity of Peter, who never allowed his status as the lead apostle. And I quote from Luke's gospel, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." The famous quote from none other than Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He never allowed his status as the lead apostle to go to his head. He remained a humble individual throughout his life, as it has been documented, when he said, "Stand up, for I am only a man myself." Now let's talk about Peter's faithfulness. Peter then goes on to reveal the meaning of the vision, which we went over the last time we were together, as it applied to himself and all the others present. And I quote, "You are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate with a Gentile or to visit him. But God has shown me that I should not call any man impure or unclean." And so in this context, the Spirit of the Lord in Peter's vision was telling Peter at the end of the period that the end of the period of dissociation with Gentiles in his own life had happened, in fact, and what had already occurred. This was a personal command from God to Peter, the military equivalent of a direct order. And now let's compare this to what we talked about 5 minutes ago. In much the same way as the Jews regarded Gentiles as unclean, and in much the same way as white America called black Americans unclean, dating back, well, all the way through the 20th century and back into the 19th, 18th, and 17th too. We had no right to do that. We've sinned against you, my black brothers and sisters. And I, for one, apologize. Yeah. We'll get into the other stuff about medicine later on. And that's a whole nother topic. Okay, so we are at the part where we were talking about Peter's faithfulness. Now, Peter then goes on to reveal the meaning of his vision as it applied to himself and all the others present. "You are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate with a Gentile or to visit him." I'm quoting here once again. "But God has shown me that I should not call any man impure or unclean." So, in this context, people, the Spirit of the Lord in Peter's vision was telling Peter to end the period of dissociation with Gentiles within at least his own life. And this was a personal command from God. This was a direct order from the commander-in-chief to the soldier. Now, what's a modern application for this? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Now I'm going to lay this on you. This also applies to racism the world over, and particularly here in America, as I was remarking. Nobody can profess their love for God, no matter how loud or emotional, and yet while at the same time despising any human being that he has created. For a scriptural reference on that, go to 1 John chapter 4, verses 19 and 20. It's all right there. Any man who says he loves God and hates his brother is a liar. But I won't spoil it. Go on and read the whole thing for yourself. In the meantime, the Bible is clear in its stance against racism and bigotry, against bigotry in all its forms. No matter how harmless it may seem to a small minority who may consider themselves greater than others. The whole idea that one human being can be any better than another is a lie straight out of the deepest pits of hell. I will stand against hatred and prejudice for the rest of my life. And so, quickly running through part 3 of this week's final 3 study verses, Cornelius answered, 4 days ago I was in my house praying at this hour at 3 in the afternoon. No, it's at 3 in the afternoon, excuse me. 4 days I was in my house praying at this very hour at 3 in the afternoon, and suddenly a man in shining clothes stood before me and said, Cornelius, God has heard your prayer and remembered your gifts to the poor. Send it to Joppa for Simon, who is called Peter. He is a guest of Simon the tanner who lives by the sea. And so I sent for you immediately, and it was good for you to come. Now we are all here in the presence of God to listen to everything the Lord has commanded you to tell us. Acts chapter 10, verses 30 through 33. And so Cornelius, you see, had this burning faith inside of him that was so intense that he used all the available resources he had to hear a word from God through Christ. Peter represented Christ by deed and reputation because he was so incorruptible. If only we had a lot more politicians like Peter. America sure would be in a much better shape, and maybe the whole darn world while we're at it. And so as we close out this week's study, part 2 of Acts chapter 10, Peter and Cornelius have been united in person and in spirit with the Lord as they presided over the home of Cornelius and everyone in it. Cornelius encourages people to go ahead and tell all he knows about Christ and his gospel. And as we will see next week when we move on to part 3, or the next time if this is on film, Peter eagerly shares all that Jesus taught him and the other apostles, and he does so with the greatest of enthusiasm. And so be sure and return next week for the third part of our study of Acts chapter 10. Shalom, everyone. I want to thank you all for the privilege of your time. It is much appreciated. If you have a prayer request, send me an email at webpreacher@yahoo.com. That's webpreacher, all one word, at yahoo.com. No phone calls, or at least not yet. Online counseling will be available too. I'm in the process of setting that up as we speak. And so I guess that's all for now. And everyone, please be blessed in Jesus' mighty name.